rainbow and a sunrise. I don't know if that's kind of interesting. What's up? You're here, and that's a good thing. And I'm looking at some awesome fishing footage from a wet and windy late December day in the MRGO. Now, if you're not from around here, MRGO stands for Mississippi River Gulf Outlet. It's an old shipping channel, and the locals here fondly call it the Mr. Go. You know, in apocalyptic movies where they show you scenes of these giant structures from some ancient time, they don't tell you what they are, they're just sticking out of the ground. Well, the MRGO is a bit like that. It's this giant, straight, rock-lined channel. It looks very industrial and very purposeful, massive. But there's no industrial activity going on. And so you're there and you just wonder, what the heck is this? Why did they build this thing? So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later in the video. But all you need to know for now is that the fishing in the Mr. Go is off the charts good. Now that's not to say that it's always easy to catch fish here. And in fact, on this day, they really take us to task. They make us drag them out of the rocky shoreline where we're just as likely to get snagged on the rocks as we are to catch a speckled trout. In fact, our success on this day had to do with how well we could bounce jigs off the top of the rocks through the grass without getting snagged to catch a speckled trout. So sit back, check out the catching for a few minutes, and then I'll be back to talk more about the Mr. Go channel and what makes it a healthy habitat. A lot of rock down here.
Yes, there is.
That's probably why they're here.
Huh?
That's probably why they're here. That is a fish. What do I got? A fish?
Got a fish, John.
A fish.
I'll take it off.
That thing grabbed it right by the rocks. Might be a little bit bigger one, man. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, nice one. Real nice.
Yeah. Oh, mackerel. That's a good nice trout.
Might be a releaser.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
On the chartreuse.
That's a good
Sweetness.
17. On a chartreuse too.
Really? Everybody's
crazy. Just when you think you got these trout figured out. Not only did you find the trout, Don, but you found the right size trout too.
Here, hold that bait up. Do a shout out to Mr. Green.
Yes, sir, Mr. Green. Lacombe, Louisiana.
That's tough.
Go, come on, baby. Stay on this time.
Swinging up front.
It's a nice one.
Maybe another foot back.
Nope, not that big, but he's a nice one. Yeah.
Pretty true. Yeah, it's about
That
15.
chartreuse right on there. Whoa.
Crazy. Absolutely.
Not hitting it really at all. I mean, it's like I'm hitting grass, or I am hitting grass, and the fish is in the grass.
It's a nice one too.
That's a nice trout.
Yeah, baby.
That's a good 16.
Was he up against
15
that grass, John?
Bam!
There we go.
Oh, doubled up.
Sling him back here, Don.
John.
Nice trout. Oh, that's a nice trout.
Yeah, let's have a picture. Let's have a doubles picture.
Chartreuse day.
There we
Showing that
go,
chartreuse.
day. Just move a little bit down the rocks. Get some new area with grass, and we think it's grass. And there they are.
It's pulling like a. Oh yeah, fat.
Oh yeah, that's a 16
That's
there.
a good 15. Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Thought I was hung in the grass, and then I felt a little resistance, and I said, I'll set the hook.
So there's the grass. It's the widgeon grass that this trout are hiding in. So submerged aquatic vegetation is linked very strongly to a good fishery, and that's because the SAV, again, submerged aquatic vegetation, creates a habitat or cover for bait to survive in. And then that's going to attract the predators, and they're going to be able to still ambush the bait, but not completely clean out all of the smaller species. So you really want the SAV in the habitat for good fishing, or any kind of cover. So it could be a coral reef, but obviously we're not talking about coral reefs here. We're talking about SAV, and we have other submerged cover as well. But the SAV is very important. So why am I standing in front of a map to talk about SAV? Well, it's because what goes on in our estuary with the larger factors going that impact it, those types of things will also impact the SAV to a large extent. And one of the big ones there is salinity. And you can't talk about salinity in the Lake Pontchartrain Basin, St. Bernard Parish and all Lake Pontchartrain without talking about the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet Channel. Now, I know that some of you would like the MRGO to be reopened down at the dam. You'd like to see that salty water come back up and reclaim the glory days of Seabrook and the Lake Pontchartrain trestles. And so in the early 2000s, 7-pound plus trout were caught regularly on the trestles every year. I don't know how many, but a number of them were caught. It was a big trout fishery back in the day. So I agree, that's wonderful, that's great, but I wonder if we have to compare today to what it was like before the MRGO. So the MRGO was completed in 1968. So that became a ship channel. And again, here on the map, it's a 76 mile long channel that runs from the Gulf of Mexico, which you can't see on this map, but straight up in here to the intercoastal. And the reason that they built the MRGO was because they wanted to move all of the wharfs here on the Mississippi River up to a central port. And the MRGO was that route that the ships would come up to that port. And it's one of those things, if you think about it, you may not think about it, or you may think negatively about it, but human beings are an expanding sort of species. We change things. We're not content to just sustain ourselves. We're all about creativity, expansion, building. And so we got to deal with that. Sometimes it works out poorly, and in this case they built that channel. They thought it was going to be a good idea. I don't know all the reasons why, but that port up there on the intercoastal up here, they thought they were going to have a big port. It just never happened. The infrastructure never got built. So the MRGO channel was used very little. And after Katrina, after it contributed to a lot of the destruction of Katrina, because the seawater got pushed right up, straight up from the Gulf into Lake Pontchartrain, and then that overflowed. So huge mess, and they blamed a lot of it on the MRGO. And so in 2009 they put that rock dam, it's actually earthen and rock dam, down there below in the channel below Hopedale, and then also started building the wall in Chalmette, and that was completed around, say, 2012, in that time frame. And so those two barriers basically locked the high salinity out of the Mr. Go and then out of Lake Pontchartrain. And that ended the great epic era of Seabrook, when I wasn't there to fish it, but apparently a 3-pound fish was just a medium-sized fish for Seabrook. And again, the era of the big trout fishing at the trestles in Lake Pontchartrain, and a lot of other changes have happened as well. So it's not just the closing of the MRGO, but things are different now. And just in regard to convention, naming convention, when I think of the MRGO, I think of it in 3 sections. So the MRGO has a south, central, and a north. So I consider south up from, say, the Long Rocks up to the dam. Central is from north of the dam to the Marcella Castle. And then north is Marcella Castle up to the wall. And to me, those are kind of 3 distinct regions. And in some ways, well, they're all quite different from each other. The central and north are more similar, but certainly the south is a much different habitat fishery than the north, and the central, again, a bit more like the north, but it has its own unique characteristics that make me fish it a little bit different. So that's how I think of the MRGO when I'm talking about it. But going back to grasses, the MRGO channel had a big effect on the grasses in the Lake Pontchartrain Basin. So before that time, the salinity would have been fairly low in Lake Pontchartrain. I mean, now that it's all sealed off and we can get real-time data, at the trestles, the salinity stays mostly below 12 ppt. It's unusual to be over 12 ppt. Mostly it's, I mean, of course it varies. It's high when the Mississippi River is low, and then it goes low when the river's high. So a lot of variation, but again, less than about 12. South of the dam, it's similar down in here. 10 to 12 is about as high as it'll get, and it's getting a lot of water. There's a lot of Mississippi River water coming from the Mardi Gras Pass and down farther with breaches at Fort St. Philip, and so that's filling a lot of river water into this area, and that also affects the salinity over here in the MRGO South. So salinity back before 68 was probably quite low. I actually haven't really found data for that, but certainly it must have been very low, and that means that the grasses that are not tolerant to high salinity, like eelgrass, probably was quite abundant in Lake Pontchartrain, in the Lake Pontchartrain Basin, before the opening of the MRGO. And so when the salinities came up, from what I understand, that eelgrass, a lot of it would have died because the salinity is too high. It's not tolerant enough. Now the widgeon grass has a kind of medium rating as far as salinity tolerance, so it could survive better than the eelgrass did. But I would much rather have eelgrass to fish than widgeon grass. Widgeon grass to me is more like a cornfield. It does provide good cover, but the predators are able to move through it pretty easily. So there's less cover in it than you would have there's less cover for the bait than you would have, say, in eelgrass bed, where the eelgrass bed creates, it's on the bottom, it's pretty low, but has a lot of leaves, and there's a lot of places for the bait to hide in there. It's still a good environment or habitat for the predator fish like the trout. It's still good because it's got edges, they can swim over top, so it's still a good place for them to feed. But it provides more protection for the bait than widgeon grass does. So the eelgrass beds in Lake Pontchartrain, especially like on the north shore there, that's a wonderful fishery if you've never experienced that. I'll link to a video I did this fall where I was fishing there, and I know a lot of you have fished there, or maybe in your states you have similar environments. I mean, it's kind of like a seagrass environment that I've experienced in other places, mostly in Florida, where you can fish over top of them, and there's just a lot of fish, a lot of predators, a lot of bait. It's just a wonderful environment to be in. Really enjoy that. And I know that, you know, there are eelgrass beds, and there are folks that are looking at restoring more eelgrass, and they're actually doing some modeling to predict where the eelgrass and other SAV could survive, and that's a way to figure out where to replant. Unfortunately, you know, they've run out of money to do a lot of replanting, but you know, I hope that's coming in. And a good source for finding out what's going on is the Lake Pontchartrain Basin Foundation. They have a lot of good things going on at Lake Pontchartrain, and they're aware of that and talk about it. But would love to see more eelgrass. But when the problem is, when you kill that with high salinity, it's hard to get it back again. And that's partly because all of these SAVs will help to stabilize the sediment. And when you have entrained sediment due to wave action, if it's not tied down by the SAV, then you get it entrained into the water, and that creates turbidity. And turbidity is not good for this SAV. SAV is a plant, it blooms, and it has a growing season from you know, spring through summer, and it needs sunlight. You have high turbidity, you have low sunlight, you're gonna have low growth that year. So it can be hard to get them restarted. It's not just, you can't just like lower the salinity and then boom, the eelgrass just comes back again. Apparently it's not that easy. And part of that is because the turbidity can remain high because the beds are not there to hold down the sediment. And of course, so it's a good thing that we've lowered the salinity in the Lake Pontchartrain Basin by closing the MRGO. It's a good thing. But now we're dealing with this high Mississippi River water the last number of years, and if this trend continues, it's probably going to be a bad thing for the eelgrass, especially in Lake Pontchartrain, because like in 2019, when you have like 100 days of the Bonnet-Carré spillway being open, you have a really high turbidity there, and that's going to negatively impact those eelgrass, the eelgrass growth. As well, that higher turbidity, when it moves through the water, actually creates drag. It hits the leaves. I mean, the plants can clean the water of particles in that way, because the particles come, they hit the leaves, so then they slow down and then they can fall out or agglomerate and then fall out as larger particles. But on the downside of that is you have drag created by those particles that are going through the water, and they get stuck to the leaves, and then it can push the plants. It can actually even uproot the plants. So having a high particle loading is not good for the eelgrass or the widgeon grass. But that's what we have to deal with. Can't flood New Orleans. So anyway, I am very glad for the MRGO. It's created now that it's, you know, it's in control somewhat. It's not eroding the environment. You know, originally it was 650 feet wide, and some during that sort of when it was open, the erosion opened some areas to 3,000 feet wide. So it was very destructive. And I think over the long term, it wasn't worth it for sure. I think it's just destroying the habitat too much. But I'm very glad for it as it exists now. It's created wonderful places to fish. Very, very happy and feel privileged to be able to live in a place where, which has a fishery like the MRGO. So if you enjoy this content, hey, give it a thumbs up. And stay with me. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I appreciate you watching me, and if you want to subscribe, that helps the channel. It helps to tell me that people are out there and wanting more of this content. So anyway, good luck in 2020 and keep fishing.